So it is time to upgrade that raggedy old boring home ISP router to a new Unifi system. But what is the best way to go about this so you don't have a lot of downtime? Can the two be running at the same time? Can you keep your same IP scheme? Can you keep your same Wi-Fi name and password? How does that all work? So today I thought I would show you how I approach this so you guys can cut over to your new equipment with as little downtime as possible and make that process go smooth. Let's get started. Hey guys, it's Tim Trich here with Ethernet Blueprint. Thank you for stopping by. So I've got quite a few questions in my comments about what is the best way, right, to cut over to a new Ubiquiti network, get things set up, but without disrupting your home, right? There's still things happening. You guys are streaming. Maybe you got the kids gaming if they're home on the weekends and this is a weekend project. Wife needs to work from home, whatever the case may be. How can you incorporate this new system without disrupting your home universe? So today I thought I would show you kind of some of the things I think about as I go through this. We're going to talk about IP schemes, Wi-Fi names and passwords, things like that to get you from A to B, whether you're doing it now or sometime here in the future. All right, and so I want to set the stage just a little bit, right? So the goal here is to go from your old system. Now your old system can really be just about anything out there, right? It could be your ISP router, maybe you have a modem router combo, we'll talk about that a little bit. Maybe you have a mesh system and you're looking to go to a hardwired system, so you're replacing your Orbeez or Eros, something like that. Or maybe you just have a standard internet router, has a bunch of antennas sticking out of it, and you're looking to get rid of it because maybe the signal strength isn't what you need it to be, and so you're expanding your coverage through a Ubiquiti system. Whatever system you guys have, the stuff we're talking about should apply to you, okay? And then we're going to be moving to a Ubiquiti system of some kind. Now, the good news is no matter which system you're going to, whatever equipment you plan on buying, the stuff we're talking about should really work. Now, for us, here in the video, I'm going to be going to a Cloud Gateway Ultra. We have an 8-port switch, and then I have a U6 long-range access point that we're going to be setting up as part of the process. And we're going to incorporate some VLANs, which means some additional Wi-Fi networks that maybe your old system isn't capable of. And we're going to talk through just some general things, again, that I like to think about to make this process go smooth. So we're going to head down to the lab. I'm going to fire things up. We're going to get things going. I'm going to show you step by step. Now, one thing I will tell you, when it comes to the setup of like the Cloud Gateway Ultra and adopting switches and things like that, I'm going to kind of breeze through that pretty quick. This video is not a how to set up a new network as much as it is as the process to get you from A to B, to show you the steps. So I'm going to breeze through a little bit. I will show you how to connect everything up and what you need to do, but this video is not designed to show you how to set up these new pieces of equipment. We're going to fast forward through some of that so our video isn't an hour and a half long. So just kind of understand there will be some stuff I breeze over. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Sometimes I forget things, and so I'll typically answer questions that way. So let's head down to the lab and get going. Thanks. All right, guys, so welcome to the lab. All right, so let me introduce you real quick and we'll talk about what's the best way to do this, and then we'll actually go through the process here. So right here, you'll see a Synology router. This is going to represent the router that we're replacing, the router that everybody in the home is connected to currently, and we can't take down until we are 100% ready to do so. And it is handing out a 192.168.1.something IP address to all of our devices, okay? So I did that on purpose because I know that that particular subnet is very common in a lot of routers. And so at the end of the video, we are going to talk about what happens if you want to keep that subnet in the new equipment. We'll talk through that a little bit. So we're going to be moving to a Cloud Gateway Ultra. Like I mentioned, we have an 8-port switch and a U6 LR access point. So we're going to be setting up that equipment in addition to leaving this online. So one of the questions I get is, can both of these be online at the same time? And the answer is yes. Matter of fact, that is what really makes this the easiest to cut over, is if we connect our new equipment to our old equipment and run them side by side. However, you're going to run into some little decisions to make as we go along as it pertains to Wi-Fi and, again, the IP schemes that we're going to use for our VLANs and stuff like that. So we're going to talk through that as we go through the process. but just understand that yes, you can run these at the same time, and that is what I recommend doing. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to do this in kind of two parts because if you have your ISP router that is both a modem router combo, you'll handle this situation just a little bit differently than having a separate router that sits out by itself that's plugged into an external modem somewhere, right? If the, like in the case of like your Google Mesh system or maybe the router you bought from Best Buy and it is just a router, not a combo, you are going to treat this process a little bit different because that router will go completely out of the equation when it's all said and done. However, the modem router combo device may still be required in your setup, even with Ubiquiti, once you get moved over. So we're going to kind of show you and talk through both of those examples, and I'll have the chapters drawn out in the, or named in the bottom of the video here, so you can find the slot or the part of the video that makes the most sense or applies to you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get this hooked up, so let's talk through that. All right, so let's get this thing all connected up. So we have our new Ubiquiti router that we need to bring online, okay? And we have our old system, all right? On the old system, typically you'll have some available LAN ports that you can physically connect devices into, okay? So we're gonna need one of those, and if all of yours are full, you're gonna probably have to unplug something to be able to get the new system in, because we do need a physical connection to bring this device online, okay? So we're gonna need one of those. On your Ubiquiti gear, you're going to have multiple ports, whatever device it is. One is usually indicated with a globe. This one has a little blue globe that indicates the internet port. So we're going to connect the internet port on the Ubiquiti device to one of the LAN ports on our old system to bring this guy online. So I've already got power connected to it because I didn't want to wait for it to boot up. We got our cable here, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that into the WAN port of our Ubiquiti device. And then I'm going to go ahead and just plug it into one of the 4 ports on our old router. And again, nobody's going to go offline. Everything's going to work. If you did have to unplug something, hopefully you pick something that can go offline, maybe like the Philips Hue hub or something like that. So, you know, everybody can still do their stuff. And then basically we're just going to wait for this device to come online, and it has. So when I look at the little interface on the front, it says, go ahead and use the app. We're online. We have an active internet connection. We can go ahead and set this up. So that's what we're going to actually do. Now, to make it easier for you guys, the viewer, I'm going to set this up using my computer. However, I don't have to do that. As long as I'm within the close proximity of the device, it'll pick up via Bluetooth, and I can set it up using the app on my phone. But I think it's easier for you guys to follow if we go ahead and do it on the computer. It makes everything look a little bigger. So I got my cable around my neck here. We're going to go ahead and plug that in to my computer that I have sitting here. So I'm just going to plug in, if you are doing it with your computer, I'm just plugging into one of the available LAN ports on this, okay? And the other end is going to go to my computer, okay? So we're going to go ahead and just get that connected. All right. Okay, so first we need to find out what IP address we need to use to connect to our Cloud Gateway Ultra or whatever device you're using. So I'm going to pull up command prompt here, and we're just going to do an IP config. Real quick, this tells me what IP address was given to my computer when I plugged into it physically. So I'm looking under the Ethernet. If you have a Mac, you might have to pull up your Ethernet settings and find out what IP address you were given from that. And you can see that my gateway, which is my router, is 192.168.0.1. So let's go ahead and pull that up on a browser here. 192.168.0.1. Enter. All right, there's our nice little Ubiquiti flashy. All right, so we're going to give this thing a name real quick. Like I said, I am going to go through this rather quickly, so there'll be some fast forwarding because we don't want the video to be super long. The talking points of what we're talking about is the important stuff here. So let's give it a name. All right, next. Sign in. I'll have to blur this part out for you guys. We're not going to restore. We're going to just continue without a backup, set it up as a new device. I'm going to go ahead and skip the speed tests. And we'll just enter our stuff in here. All right, setup complete. Go to dashboard. There we go. And we can log in here. Or we can actually just go to our unifi.ui.com cloud and we can access it there. So we can do it either way. I'll go ahead and just do it here just so we're not confusing anything. But we'll go ahead and log in. Okay, sign in. And we have dual authentication on, so we'll go ahead and allow that. Let's go ahead and switch into dark mode so it's easier to see for you guys. And now we are in the Cloud Gateway Ultra. It is online, and we should be good to go. We got the network aspect here, so we'll click into that. And there we go. We are online. So now we need to add our switch, add our access point. So I'll plug in those and go ahead and adopt them. And then we're going to do some setup, and we're going to kind of, once we get everything set up, we'll kind of stop and talk through a couple things. So let's go ahead and get those going. All right, guys, so everything's online now. So we're going to kind of pause here, and we're going to talk through a couple things. But just to recap, everything is online here. We don't have any Wi-Fi set up. We don't have any VLANs set up. Okay, we just have it set up as a basic system, kind of out of the box, just by clicking next, 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 and getting it going. Okay, and everybody is still connected to our main router here. Okay, we haven't disconnected that at all. Everybody is still connected to it. So what this is going to allow us to do is we can get in here and configure the things the way we want them. And this is some of the area where you're going to have to kind of make a decision on how you want to do your cutover. So we'll talk through that just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next section here, and we'll talk through that. Okay, so now that we have everything set up, I wanted to create a slide and talk through what we're actually building here. And this is to the point, this is the part here where we're going to have to make some decisions, right? We have to decide how to set up our new system and how we want to do this cutover, okay? So right now, as it stands, our old router, symbolized by the Synology here, has a Wi-Fi name on it called My Home Wi-Fi, okay, with a password. And then it is handing out the IP address subnet 192.168.1.x like we mentioned earlier. Now, one scenario we could do, right, with the new equipment is we could have two Wi-Fi networks. One could be the exact same as our old one, which makes cutovers really easy, right? Because once you turn off the old Wi-Fi and create the new Wi-Fi, all your devices will just connect to the new system. That's really great. Now, there is a downside, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then I think we want to create a My Home IoT network, right? So part of the benefits of having a system like this is to be able to create some VLANs and create multiple networks to create some security in our home network. So we're going to be creating two new Wi-Fi networks, okay? And when we get into that, we'll talk a little bit more detail on some of the pros and cons here. And then we're going to create two new subnets, right? We have a 192.168.10. network for our main stuff. This is going to be our laptops, tablets, you know, the devices you use every day. It's going to, a lot of times it's considered the more secure of the two networks. And then we're going to create a 192.168.20.x for our IoT devices, okay? Now, as it stands right now, all of your IoT devices are connected to My Home Wi-Fi, okay, in the old system. So when we create the new My Home Wi-Fi, most of those IoT devices will just move over, and you'll have to use the app or whatever you use to set them up to manually move them one at a time over into the new My Home IoT network, okay? There's just no getting around it. However, if you decide you're only upgrading equipment and you don't want a My Home IoT network, then you can kind of forget that part. Everything will just connect to the My Home Wi-Fi. So again, it really just depends on what you want to do and how you want this cutover to go. If you don't like the idea of having multiple Wi-Fi networks, you just want to run on newer equipment, no problem. You can just leave that part out, okay? So let's talk about the My Home Wi-Fi, naming it the exact same. There is a downside to doing this, all right? Yes, it will make the cutover very, very quick and allow devices to be just down for a really short period of time, but all those devices, once they connect into your network here, if you go into your clients, they're all going to flood in. They're all going to be in there. You're going to have, all of a sudden, you'll have 0 devices, and then you'll go to 50 devices or whatever you guys have at your house. And I feel it's important to name your devices. Now, Ubiquiti does a pretty good job of figuring out what's connected to it. It knows if it's a Hue hub or a laptop or whatever, but it doesn't always do a good job. So you might have some devices in here that are unknown, and you'd have to do some further investigating as to what they are, if you even care. I just feel like to manage a network correctly, it's nice to name things. I like to name my access points. I like to name my switch. I like to name things, okay? I just think it's easier when you're looking at something, or if you guys get into firewall rules or you want to create some special traffic rules, you want to know what devices you're controlling. And if they just say unknown, it's hard to do that. So one way you can do that is for your new Wi-Fi, you name it something different. So you would call it My Home Wi-Fi 2, right? And so the My Home Wi-Fi 2 is broadcasting on the Ubiquiti, and the My Home Wi-Fi is on your old system. And then you would just go to each device and move them over one at a time. Now, if you have 150 devices, obviously this is going to take you a while. So that's on you as far as which way you want to do it. But it will make it very easy to name them as you move them over. As you move your wife's laptop in, you do your high priority items first, the Xbox, move your wife's laptop in there, maybe some of the kids' devices. As you move them in there, you'll be able to name them and list what they're called in the system. You know, it's kind of pros and cons on how you want to do it. You can either flood everything in at once and try and sort it out, or move devices in one at a time and actually really organize your stuff. It will make it easier to manage your network if you do that. All right, and then like I said, the IoT network, that's completely optional, and the VLANs are completely optional. But we do teach this stuff on this channel, so I thought it would be good to go ahead and incorporate that. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and create this in here, and we'll talk through the process here. I am going to go fast. I'm not going to explain why I'm putting things the way they are, but I will kind of talk through it. So we're going to create 2 new VLANs and 2 wireless networks. So we're going to start in settings, go to networks, and we're going to create our networks first. Now, one thing here is with our current setup, we are creating 2 new VLANs, VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 for our IoT and main network. Now, normally I would say you just change your default network. However, if I change this to 10.1, which it'll let me do, it will not let me call that VLAN 10. So I'd have a 192.168.10 address, and it'd be VLAN 1. This default network has to remain VLAN 1. So, because I don't want that, we're just going to go ahead and create 2 new networks and leave default there. We're just going to leave it alone and just not use it. So we're going to come in here, create a new virtual network here. We're going to call this the main network. All right, I'm going to turn off auto scaling. This is a 10.1 address, okay? Then we can come down here, switch to VLAN 10, which is what we want, and hit save, okay? So we're not going to go through all the other stuff. Everything by default's perfectly good for what we're doing. All right, we're going to create our IoT network now. All right, turn off auto scaling, make this a 20. Okay, change it to VLAN ID to 20. See, I like that to match. So it's 20.1 is VLAN 20. It just wouldn't let us do that with the default, so we're just going to not use it. All right, so now we have our main network and our IoT networks, and we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 created respectively. So if anybody connects to the main network, they're going to receive a 192.168.10 address. And if anybody connects to the IoT network, they're going to get a 20 address. Okay, but we don't have any Wi-Fi yet, so we need to create Wi-Fi next to connect to these networks. We're going to go into Wi-Fi. We're going to come up here and we're going to call this one My Home Wi-Fi, just exactly like we have it, but I'm going to put a 2 afterwards. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because if we have the same network broadcasting on 2 different systems at the same time, some of your devices are going to get confused. You're going to have some of your devices moving over right away. Some of them will remain on the old system. So we change it just ever so slightly to control that. So when we do the cutover, we control when the devices cut over, right? So we're just going to alter it just a little bit. And that way we don't have any devices make the jump ahead of time, okay? We'll add a password here. All right, so I set it to the exact same password. We're going to choose our network. This is our main network, so we're going to take it off default. And we're just going to go ahead and say add network. I'm not going to change any of the other settings. All right, now the IoT network, the IoT Wi-Fi network is new. So we won't have nothing will be jumping to that one. So we're going to go ahead and just create my IoT Wi-Fi. Okay, same password. You can change your passwords accordingly, whatever you'd like them to be. So we're going to choose the IoT network. So any device that connects to this will receive a 20 dot address. And we'll just go ahead and say add Wi-Fi network. Okay, so now we got my home Wi-Fi 2, my IoT Wi-Fi, and then we also have our main router that is broadcasting the my home Wi-Fi. Okay guys, so let's talk about the first scenario here where this device, your old router, is a modem router combo. Now I don't have one here to show you guys, but I'll show you with the slide. So, a lot of like Xfinity routers, Cox routers, a lot of those devices, you can even go to Best Buy and buy a modem router combo to replace your ISP equipment in a lot of cases, okay? So in the case if this is you and you have a modem router combo as your old device, all right, you basically have two options here. One is you can put this device in bypass or transparent mode, the terminology, whatever they call it in your system, but typically it's bypass or transparent mode. And what that does is that turns off all router functionality in this device and really just treats it like a modem. Once it's in that mode, your gateway will actually receive an IP address, a WAN address from your internet service provider, and it'll just flow through this guy right here. Now he has to remain in the equation. You can't disconnect him, okay? He has to stay here, but basically he's in a transparent state where he's just passing the traffic through to your Ubiquiti equipment. Now that's my favorite option. If your device will allow you to do that, that's what I would recommend doing. I just think it makes your network much simpler, and you're less likely to run into challenges down the road with, say, something like port forwarding or VPN, okay? So you would need to log into this device. I would recommend physically plugging in with a laptop versus using the app or whatever. Maybe you have to use the app. A lot of these ISPs actually force you to use an app to manage your equipment, but you're going to need to get into this thing. It'll be most likely in the advanced settings, and you're going to turn off the router functionality by putting it in transparent bridge mode, okay? It will require a reboot to come up in that mode, and most likely your new Ubiquiti equipment will also require a reboot or two to do that. So before you get to that step, make sure you tell your family, guys, I'm cutting things over. Everything's going to be down for a little bit until I can get you guys back up, okay? Once you get all the equipment back up in transparent mode and this is working again, you just simply have to go into your Ubiquiti setup, into the Wi-Fi settings, and remove the 2 off the My Home Wi-Fi, and your devices will start connecting up. Because remember, we changed it to something different on purpose, okay? So that's one scenario. The other scenario is you can just leave this as a router, but instead of putting it in bypass mode, but you're going to still want to log into it and turn off the Wi-Fi. And I don't mean make them blank, so you wipe it out or you change it. You could change it, but I recommend going into the Wi-Fi settings. Usually it's in the advanced Wi-Fi settings of your system, and actually turning off the Wi-Fi bands. So they're no longer broadcasting or using those. This particular router actually has a Wi-Fi button on the side of it. So if you have that availability to you, you could also do that and just turn off the Wi-Fi in there. But I recommend going into the system and actually turning it off. Then once the Wi-Fi is off there, you would go into your Ubiquiti system, turn on the Wi-Fi network by removing the 2, and now all your devices will connect, and we're forcing them to connect to the new Ubiquiti system. So that is how you would do that with this type of modem router combo. Okay, so now let's talk through the scenario where this is not a modem router combo and you have some modem, maybe it's an ONT fiber box somewhere, and your old equipment is currently connected to it, okay? And we want the new equipment to be connected to it because we're going to remove this out of the equation. So this would be the case where maybe you have a mesh system in your house, or maybe you went to Best Buy and bought yourself some kind of third-party Netgear router, has all the antennas on it. This would be that scenario, okay? So basically your house setup would be you have a modem, service is being brought to your house, you have a modem of some kind, sometimes it's a fiber modem, sometimes it's a coaxial modem, whatever you have, and then that device is physically connected into your router that's doing your Wi-Fi. Now in a case like that, this device is going to go away, which makes this really easy. If you watch the previous part, we talked about the modem router combo. That's a little more complicated because you got to get in and tweak some things and change some settings. With this particular setup, you just have to remove this device or turn off all of your mesh system devices or whatever. So That's what we're going to talk through next. All right, so we have our home router, we have our new router. You basically want to tell your family, okay guys, we are going to do the cutover now. I have everything ready to go, and we're going to actually cut this thing over so things are going to be down. Then you're going to simply remove the WAN cable from your internet router. So now this device is no longer getting its connectivity from your ISP, okay? And you can power it off, just power it off. I'm gonna leave mine on, but you would actually turn the router off so it's no longer broadcasting, nothing, okay? Now remember, currently we have our cloud key plugged into this router. So we're actually gonna unplug that, and we can move this equipment to the side, set it in the donate box, whatever you wanna do. Then we're gonna remove this cable, right? Now we want to get our internet from the modem that's in our house. So we're actually going to pull this over here, and we are going to plug that into our internet cable. So this is now the cable that was plugged into our old router is now feeding our new router, okay? Now, in some cases, guys, you may have to reboot this. I didn't have to, but I'm also not receiving a public IP address directly into this device. If you have a modem from your ISP, most likely you'll have to reboot this device, maybe even a couple times for it to pull down that new information, okay? And if you have a physical modem that has a power on it, you may have to power cycle your modem, because what happens is that older modem creates a little relationship with your old equipment, okay? And they kind of create a bond, and you've just removed one piece of it, right? So it's still looking for its buddy, even though you've taken it out of the equation and you found him a new buddy. So in a lot of cases, just power off the modem and power off your new router. Power up the modem first, let it come all the way up, and then go ahead and power up your new router, and it should receive a public IP address from your ISP. Once you're online, once the little screen on here says you're good to go and you're online, then all you need to do is go into your, you're going to need to go into your Ubiquiti setup, and you're going to change the My Home Wi-Fi 2 to just My Home Wi-Fi, right? You just take off the 2. As long as everything else matches perfectly, the password, and you didn't add any other spaces or anything, all of your devices will just come over and connect, okay? And your old equipment will no longer be in the equation, and you'll be running on your new equipment broadcast on here, okay? So that is the process for doing that. And it's really, really simple, but remember the downside to do it. All of your equipment's going to come in at once. It's all going to come flooding in, and when that happens, that means that you're going to have to kind of maybe do some discovery to name your devices, if that's something you guys care to do. But it does make the cutover time much, much shorter, which is kind of what we're going for here, right? Little downtime as possible, and everything just goes nice and smooth. So hopefully that helps you guys out with your scenario. Now, next we're going to talk about the IP address thing. Remember we talked about in the beginning, if you want to keep that 192.168 scheme in your new equipment, just like your old equipment, we're going to talk about that next. Okay guys, so the last thing I'm going to talk about here, and you can skip this part if it doesn't apply to you, but is how do I make it so that my new equipment uses the same 192.168.1 whatever subnet that my old equipment was doing. Now, personally, I don't think it's worth doing this. I don't think it's worth transferring the stuff over, but you may have your reasons, and I'm pretty sure the question will come up in the comments, so I figured I would go ahead and cover it. Now, the reason it didn't work in the beginning, when we had everything connected together and we were building our Ubiquiti network behind our old network, is because our old equipment was handing out 192.168.1 addresses, 1. whatever addresses, okay? So it already had that subnet. We plugged a cable from this device into the WAN port on our new router, which means our router received a 192.168.1. something address on the internet port, on the WAN side. Because it was used on the WAN side, they will not let you use it on the LAN side, which is where your VLANs are and stuff. If you tried to configure it, it would just say, sorry, there's a subnet overlap. It will not let you do it, okay? Because we had it over here, we can't put it over here. So that's why we chose to create a 10 dot network and a 20 dot network and leave the default alone, okay? That's why we did it that way. If you want this device to be able to hand out 192.168.1 addresses for whatever reason, okay, you'll need to do a couple things here. And this is going to add a little bit of complication and probably some downtime to your build, but if it's important to you, I'm sure your family will understand. Okay, first off, if you have gotten rid of your old router in this scenario, maybe you had this, the mesh system or the Linksys router or whatever, no problem. You can actually, once your WAN port has been moved over and this has received a new IP address from your modem or however it's getting its internet, you can go into your settings and create it, okay? And I'm gonna show you that here in just a second, okay? Really, the only scenario where this would become a little bit challenging is if you have a modem router combo and it's still in router mode. If you put this thing in bypass transparent mode, then the IP address from your ISP will go directly in here and it'll no longer have a 192.168.1 address. It'll actually have a public IP connected to it. So then you can just go into your settings and create it. However, if this is still in router mode and it's a modem router combo and it has to stay, right? It's going to be remaining in the equation. You're going to be forced to log into this device. You're going to go into your LAN settings and you're going to change it in this router to be something completely different. So choose something completely different. 192.168.50.1, 99.1, 100.1, whatever. You're going to have to change the settings in here. Then you're going to have to reboot, and then you're going to have to reboot this device, and it will pull that new 192.168.50. Whatever address on the WAN side. Because our WAN port now has a different IP address, we can use that 192.168.1. Whatever address on the LAN side. So we can actually do it. So let's go over into the interface here and I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to pretend we did all that, or this piece is gone and we are getting a connection directly from our ISP. If you go into the setup that we just did and go into your your networks, remember our default network here, VLAN 1, that we couldn't change, so we just went ahead and created these two, okay? If I go into my internet here, you can see my IP address now is a 10.1.1.100 address, okay? So I don't have a 192.168. This number will be something different. Maybe it's the 192.168.50 address you set up. Maybe it's an IP address directly from your ISP, whatever. As long as it's something different than the 1 address, we can come over here into our networks, go into our default, and we can change this to 1.1. Okay? It'll allow us to make that change. And it's already VLAN 1. We can't change the VLAN number, so 1.1 is VLAN 1. Perfect. We can hit apply changes, and now our default network is now 192.168.1. something, and it's going to start handing out those addresses. That's part one. Part two is we need to go into our Wi-Fi network and make this My Home Wi-Fi choose the default network. We don't want it handing out the 10 addresses. We want it handing out the 1 addresses. So we're going to simply change this to the default. We're going to hit apply changes, and now our My Home Wi-Fi 2 is handing out 192.168.1.1. We just need to go in here, take off the 2. Whoops, I changed it to a 1. Take off the 2. And now we have My Home Wi-Fi handing out 192.168.1 of our addresses, and your devices will all connect, and they'll re-pull a new IP address, but in the Ubiquiti system, and it'll be the same as the old way. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it gets a little wordy with VLANs and IP addresses, and I'm trying to relay stuff. Hopefully this all makes sense to you. Again, personally, I don't think it's worth doing that. I would rather just have a couple different VLANs and call it a day. But if it's something that you want to do, that's how you do it. Okay, guys, I hope you were able to find this helpful. I tried to cover as many of the scenarios as I could. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing, and you were able to get what we were trying to do here. Now, one thing I will say is I have a general recommendation for doing this. My recommendation is to keep this as simple as possible. I know it seems the most beneficial to just do it in one swoop and name your new Wi-Fi the same as your old Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, if you want to utilize some of the really nice rich features in the Ubiquiti system, having your devices named is a really big part of that. And so Ubiquiti will do a pretty good job, but you're going to create some work for yourself by having to go rediscover what a lot of these devices are. If you move devices over one at a time, it makes this process much easier. So I would recommend making your new Wi-Fi name something different than your old one. Forget about making the IP scheme the same. That creates way too much work. And just start moving devices over one at a time. And as you add them into Ubiquiti, they just name them in the system. I promise it'll make life much, much easier for you in the end. And while you're moving things, if there's people still connected to your old router, they'll still be online. You just won't be able to talk to each other while stuff is between the two systems. So it really is just a little interim time when things won't, talk effectively. But I would recommend moving things over one at a time. I think it'll make your lives better. I think you'll appreciate that you did it if you name things as you go along in the long run when you start using your Ubiquiti system. So I hope that helps you guys. That's going to wrap things up for me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave in the comments. Don't forget to like or follow, and we'll see you guys in the next video.